My older boy, I saw him get to be about 21 years old, and he was just rendered incapable of doing anything he was meant to do in this world, in this life. And he was just dark, filled with emptiness and darkness, exactly like those kids that I saw in the light.
Today's NDE is brought to you by Blinkist. Blinkist is an easy-to-use app that allows you to understand the most important things from over 5,500 nonfiction books and podcasts in just 15 minutes. Get 25% off Blinkist Premium and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Start your 7-day free trial by clicking the link in the description.
Hi, I'm Angie Fenimore, and I had a near-death experience back in 1991. I had a very difficult childhood. My mother left when I was 9, and my father went off the deep end. So I don't hold any animosity, and in fact, I have a really great relationship with my mother now. But at the time, when I was turning 27 years old, I was dealing with a whole lot of emotional issues, and I blamed myself, and I sought help and couldn't find it in any direction whatsoever. I finally came to a point. I was married at the time, and I had 2 little boys who were just 2 and 5 years old, and I really felt like they would be better off without me. And so I decided to take matters into my own hands. So I did everything possible. I was very serious about this, and I laid down on the couch. I could feel it happening. I could feel myself separating from my body. And you should know that I did send my children to my neighbor's house with a note saying, I'm not feeling well. So they were not there at the time. But I laid down on the couch and I closed my eyes, and I could feel myself separating from my body. There was this huge vibration and this loud noise. I lived on an Air Force base in Okinawa, Japan at the time. And I thought for a moment that there was an F-15 coming down in the backyard. Like, it was that loud and the vibration was that powerful. And so I opened my eyes and I looked over at the sliding glass door with the drapes around the room, and it was clearly not, like, nothing was happening in the room. This was happening within my body. And so I closed my eyes again, realizing it's happening. And as I did, this experience overtook me again, this extremely loud whirring noise and this vibration, and I could feel myself pulling out of my body. And I had known, my stepmother had had a near-death experience that I'd known about, and this was 1991. This was like very, very early days about, where we even knew anything about near-death experience. So that was my only connection to it. And so I realized, oh, this is happening. I'm leaving my body. And I wanted to watch. And so I opened my eyes. And as soon as I did, I was sucked back into my body. My stepmother had gone up to the corner of the room, and she was in the emergency room, and she had watched doctors working on her. And so that's what I wanted, was to see this happening. And as soon as I opened my eyes, I could feel myself sucked back into my body. And so I eventually, I did this a few times, and then I just closed my eyes and willed it. And that was when I realized that will was part of this. Like, I was willing my own departure from this world. So I closed my eyes, and when I did, I felt myself completely separate from my body, but I was taken, instead of a pillar of light or a tunnel of light like I was expecting, like what had happened to my stepmother, I was taken to right into my life review. I was surrounded by this membrane that was kind of yellow, but illuminated, and there were red lines running through it. And I didn't realize until later what this space was that I was in. And then suddenly I felt myself like this and being squeezed. And then I was overtaken with this experience of euphoria and immense love, like emanating from myself, emanating from outside of myself. And then suddenly I was being held like this and cradled in a hand. And I'm looking up at this woman who looks exactly like me. So I was really confused, because suddenly I'm experiencing not just my own experience, but the experience of this woman as well. And so it took a second to realize I'm looking at my mother. I look exactly like my mother. And my mother had left when I was 9 years old. I had grown up feeling like she didn't want me, she didn't love me, she didn't care about me. She was self-absorbed, consumed with herself, like who leaves their two little girls. And suddenly what I experienced was very clearly she wanted me and she loved me. This was my first inclination that my own personal myopic view of myself, how I fit into this world, the way the world works, other people, was one point of view. This is my first inclination of that. And this woman looks away and she's speaking to somebody who I think was my father, actually. But it was just very clear I was wanted and I was loved. So I was taken out of that experience and into every single experience of my life in chronological order. And I experienced parts of it with more depth, more color, more time. But the big thing was that I was experiencing this from all points of view, not just my own. And it was clear that some of these experiences were more important than others. Looking back, what I know now is that those experiences were the ones that I needed to learn from. I had some horrible things that happened, but I was able to see that we're all just going through our own life, our own experience, doing the best we can with what we got. And, I was able to see my goodness, my mother was 18 years old when I was born. What 18-year-old is equipped to raise two little girls, for one thing, let alone deal with life? And I got all the way to the end of my life, and this happened like this. And it was like, at some point, I realized I'm viewing it on a screen that's before me, but it's, interactive. And I get all the way to the point where I am lying on the couch at the very end of my life. And suddenly the screen disappears. I'm surrounded by darkness, but it's not like the way we experience, like the lights are out and you can't see anything. It wasn't like that. It was like space kind of darkness where you can see forever. But I was surrounded by this darkness, and suddenly there was a presence next to me. And I knew it was male. I knew that I knew him, but I couldn't see him. I heard his voice, but it was more like, there was definitely a voice, but it's not like the way we speak. It was like this all-consuming knowing that came upon me. And he said, "This is the life you lived." That was it. There was no drama. There was no significance about it, just fact. These are the facts. So at that point, I realized I'm not in the physical world anymore. And so I had a cousin who passed at 11 years old and grandparents who'd moved on. So I swung my head looking for them, expecting to see them. And there was nobody there. And as I swung my head to the right, I saw that there was a line of teenagers next to me, young people. And there was about 6 of them. I leaned over and I looked at them, and there was a girl, she must have been about 16. And this is before I realized that information is just out there. And so I'm certain now she was 16, that was not me guessing her age by looking at her. That's what she's emanating. And she had this stringy blonde hair. But the most interesting and captivating feature about her was the emptiness and the sadness and the grief that had been just dwindled down to nothingness. Like there was nothing there, no hope, no nothing. And I had the thought, what could be so bad in your life that, you would choose to leave this world? And it was at that point I realized, oh, wow, we've all done the same thing. We've all ended our lives. And so I'm leaning over looking, and as soon as I have that thought, the kid that's standing right next to me looks down at me. He's really tall. He's got on a white t-shirt, black leather vest, and black combat boots. And his hair is dyed black and spiked. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that's very interesting. I wouldn't think that these physical traits, especially things like clothing or things you've done to your hair, would, follow through the veil and be with you on the other side. And it wasn't until later that I realized that it was my own thoughts that actually influenced the particular near-death experience that I had. So in that moment, as soon as I had the thought, I was taken from them, and I flew at the speed of light in an upright position. I have no idea how far. I know I was somewhere on the planet, but just in another dimension. And I start to slow down, and all this is happening like this very quickly. And I start to slow down at about the same time that I see a beltway of people, basically, that are just kind of landing in this space like I am. It stretches for as far as I can see to my left, and it's empty on the right, and we're just filling in, but it's this beltway. I don't know, I'd say maybe 30 feet deep or more, 60 feet deep. I don't know, not very deep. And so I land in this space and I'm looking around. And the first thing I notice is everybody is in filthy white robes, which surprised me. I didn't expect it to be that literal. And the next thing I notice is how disconnected they are from each other. By this point, I'm realizing that thoughts are audible, that you don't have to speak something for it to be known, heard, consumed. But these people don't care what anybody else thinks at all. They're just muttering, and some of them loudly, about their own circumstance. If only you had done this, then I wouldn't be blah, blah, blah. And just completely self-consumed. And at this point, I'm realizing I'm definitely not alive anymore. I'm still in this darkness, in this beltway, but there's this mist. But it's not like a physical mist from this plane. It is a molecular darkness. And it's sucking life from me, from all those there. And there was this one man in particular, and he was the only one that actually looked at anybody, but he was squatting in his filthy white robes and looking at me. I knew his eyes were blue, but I was seeing in grayscale. And at that point, that's when I realized that I was perceiving things that I shouldn't be able to know. I knew he'd been there for a very, very long time. And I wondered if this was Judas Iscariot. It was just a thought that came from me, just a question. And at that point, and it was that question that propelled me into the next piece of this experience. As soon as I had that thought, I saw a pinpoint of light in the distance. And this light was growing larger, like it was coming towards me. And it was traveling very, very fast. And it stopped like outside of this barrier. I knew that I couldn't come in to where I was. And I realized this is a being of light, that he's made of light. He was filled with light. And I knew that this was my Father in heaven. And the guy that was squatting, the man that was squatting, he was the only one that noticed there was something going on, that I was focused on something outside of this space. And he looked and then looked back at me, and he clearly didn't see this. God, there was this immense love, but it was like this fatherly, like, what did you do kind of experience. And he just said, is this what you really want? You can't skip over parts. We've all done this. You don't deserve those kids you were given. You have been up to mischief. You've been trouble. You know, you think that this is a good idea, but you have no idea what you're doing and what awaits you, and like that kind of communication. And as soon as he said, is this what you really want? I had the thought, well, I don't have a choice. I really felt like I had zero choice. That was how far gone I was at that time in my life. I believed I was better off, and that everyone in my life was better off without me. And so it hadn't occurred to me that I'd had a choice. And so I said, and this is like words without speaking, I said, you know, I don't have a choice. I've not had a choice. And as soon as I said that, there was another being next to him, but I could not see this being. I could see pinpricks of light coming through this darkness, emanating from him. I knew he was male. I knew him, and I heard his voice, and it was the same voice that had greeted me after my life review. And he said, don't you understand? I've done this for you. And as soon as he spoke those words, there were three things that happened all at the same time. I was taken into his body, and this was Christ. And I experienced him in the Garden of Gethsemane, like I'm there with him. Experienced him experiencing my life, like beginning to end. And in that moment I got, there is somebody else who knows what I've been through and what this was like for me, and how I could come to this point where I would choose this over anything else. And then at the same time, I was experiencing being in his body in that moment, and this exchange of energy going back and forth between who I perceived as God the Father and Christ, but it was like Christ downloading my experience to the Father until they were like one. And all this is happening like this. And the third thing that happened is I'm seeing myself from Christ's point of view across this invisible barrier in this dark beltway, this beltway of darkness. I see myself that way. And then I also am experiencing seeing him inside my own body. And so as soon as he said, "Don't you understand? I've done this for you," my initial thought is, yeah, okay, great, but that doesn't solve anything for me. I cannot do my life anymore. And then I was shown what would happen to my two little boys who were just 2 and 5 years old. My youngest one got to the point of being about 8 years old, and then he was taken because he could not do this life without his mother. And my older boy, I saw him get to be about 21 years old, and he was just rendered incapable of doing anything he was meant to do in this world, in this life. And he was just dark, filled with emptiness and darkness, exactly like those kids that I saw in the light. I didn't see the details of their life, but I saw like the emotional roller coaster of their life, basically. And as soon as I saw that, it was like this tiny whisper that didn't even get uttered, just like barely the smidge of a thought. Okay. And as soon as I had that thought, I was like pulled up out of this space. I was hovering above it and traveling back to my body. I was surrounded by these beings of light that were just in this, space like oil and vinegar above this dark space. And I asked this question, what are they doing? And I'm still hearing the voice of God. And I'm told they're helping you. They always have been. They're preparing the earth. They are helping all of you. So as I'm traveling back to my body, it's like I was packed this suitcase of all the things that I would need. Much of the knowledge I acquired during that trip back, I was not permitted to bring with me back through the veil. Some of it I was, but most of that was just like packed within me so that I had what I'd need in order to do this world. So one of those things that I was told was that we don't get past the year. It was approximately 2015. And mind you, this was 1991, January of 1991, without the world doing this shift where we'll no longer tolerate. The earth itself will not tolerate, like the earth has the flu with all the horrible things human beings do, and that there will be this separation. And I hate to use the words good and bad, evil. It's darkness and light is what it is, and both are required in order for anything to happen within life. And so it was 2013 when I saw this actually happen, where this happened. So I traveled back and I slip back into my body. And as I do, I sit up on the edge of the couch and I can feel the effects of everything that I've taken to make this happen. I'm just like pupils blown. I can hardly move, white as a ghost. But I look around the room and I can see on a molecular level, all my houseplants are radiating light. Like they are made of light. I can see information of light coming through my TV, which is off. But I can see like the past, the present, the future, the throw pillows on my couch. I could see them in molecular form, vibrating. We are couch serving you, serving God. We are throw pillow serving you, serving God. We are matter organized, serving you, serving. I could see that everything is made of these elements of darkness and light and spirit animated into physical form. And my then husband were still friends, but we eventually divorced many years later. But he came through the door. He worked at NORAD at the time. It's a big deal to leave. You don't leave during the middle of the day in a lockdown facility on an Air Force base. And he came in. He just had a feeling he needed to come in. And he came in, sat down on the couch, and I could tell he knew something was going on. And I just looked down and I'm like, he says, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You are not going to believe this." So that space where I could see in physical form light and darkness stayed with me for 3 days as I recovered. And it does return to me. Like I can still see it in spirit form. So that stayed with me. And when I came back a different human being. And I've continued to learn all through the years too, is that there is life in forgiveness. Like that big thing that I learned looking into my mother's face when I was just a newborn in my life review is we are all doing the best that we can. So my biggest takeaway from my own near-death experience is that, light and darkness exist, and it's not a bad thing. It just is what it is. And, life isn't meant to be perfect or easy. And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. But it's not life if it's always just perfect. Everything is just really a moment, in the grand scheme of things. And, I can endure anything. And it's not like I haven't, had some rough times or experienced loss in all these years. But I'm now able to embrace all of it, not just the light, but embrace also those tragedies that I've experienced. And not just because they teach me something, and they do, but because I cannot have one without the other. There cannot be this amazing ecstasy of being alive, the love that I experienced with my children, with my mother, with my husband, with my grandchildren, with my friends. I could not have that unless there was also the other. And so that's my biggest message, is to embrace it all, be with it all. Life is so much sweeter when we also can get that. It's that whole old adage, walk a mile in my shoes. If we all could just really get inside each other's shoes, if we all could do that, and in one moment, war would end, hunger would end, all atrocity, all depravity would end in that moment if we could be in each other's shoes. That is a very powerful place to stand, to learn to just be okay, saying sorry, and be okay that life is not perfect. That's not the design. It's, we have choice in this. Thank you for listening to my story.
If you enjoy these near-death experiences that allow you to discover new perspectives, broaden your horizons, and have exciting conversations, then you should check out Blinkist. Blinkist was created for those who love to read and learn, but don't have time. With Blinkist, you can now indulge in your favorite book or podcast without the huge time commitment. Blinkist helps with understanding the most important things from over 5,500 nonfiction books and podcasts, and makes it easy to share with your family and friends. What we like most about Blinkist is that you get personalized recommendations curated by experts, and the convenience of getting key ideas in either audio or text format. Learning new things and creating new habits is way better with people. And with Blinkist Spaces, you can now create a custom space for your book club, workplace, or group of friends to make recommendations conveniently to one another within the Blinkist app. And with Blinkist Connect, every premium plan can be shared by 2 people. But don't worry, each person will get their own separate account, so they can share what they want, when they want. With Blinkist, you will be joining the 23 million users who are already learning, reading, and listening to more content in less time. Blinkist has also teamed up with your favorite podcast creators to bring you exclusive behind-the-scenes content to some of their favorite episodes. Get 25% off Blinkist Premium and enjoy 2 memberships for the price of 1. Start your 7-day free trial by clicking the link in the description.